And yeah, so today, the cloud defined, I decided to start with this quote that maybe you may have recognized. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still sometimes clouds illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. Now, I did invite Joni Mitchell here today because I thought it was a good opportunity. I mean, she clearly is confused about the cloud, but shockingly, she had another engagement. She wasn't able to make it, but she could. I'll send her the PowerPoint. Maybe she'll help her understand a little bit better. But people don't get the cloud. It's one of those buzzwords in technology that everybody says it. Everybody says it over and over again, and they're talking about different parts of an elephant. They're not really looking at the big picture. So hopefully, I'm going to give you an overview of that so we can start talking a little bit more intelligently about specifically what the cloud is. So a definition. I started where everybody gets, I get on my kids' case about this, but what did I do? I went to Wikipedia again, so I got this right off of there. And but it's a good base starting point. Cloud computing is a term used to refer to a model of network computing where a program or application runs on a networked server or servers rather than a local computing device such as a PC, tablet, or smartphone. So all that means is you're networked. The cloud means that you are accessing your data from someplace that's not on what we call a physical LAN, or even a WAN, which is a wide area network versus a local area network, where wires are connecting you and that computer. Actually, WANs are a type of clouds because most WANs or wide area networks are networked, multiple offices while looping in. But if you are a small business and you have your server in your office, but you go home and you remote into that server, that is essentially a cloud. It's a small cloud, it's a private cloud, but it's a cloud. Now, I also wanted to go a little bit deeper into the definition here. Not really the definition, but I had this one personal question. Why do they call it the cloud? Right? What's the point of the cloud? Some of the research I showed said that it's because things are behind a cloud. So, or when you can't see them or can't see them clearly, you say they're behind a cloud, so that's where the word cloud came up in terms of cloud computing. I personally disagree with that. I believe that, if you've ever hung around engineers, they love to draw up on the whiteboard, right? And I think it's the easiest thing for them to draw. So I think when they want to say they're the network, they could have called it like a tree or a house, and that's much harder, right? So they just want to scribble something, so that's my opinion with how that came to be. All right, so let's talk a little bit more specific. I want to break it down into three categories. Personal cloud, private cloud, and public cloud. So what do I mean when I say personal cloud? That is when you have a server in your office, and as I described earlier, you can network and you can have access to that server. People don't think of that as a cloud, right? Because it's in my office, it's sitting there. But if that has many server instances on it, or you can access it from the cloud or from a remote office or even from a home office, that is essentially a personal cloud. And there may be some ahas with people going on and saying, hey, I've been in the cloud for years. This is not new, and that's where some of the cloud questions come into play. Certainly, the cloud has been around for a long time from the standpoint of networking a server. Then I'm going to just define a private cloud, and somebody already did, right? A private cloud is essentially where you have either your servers or your hardware hosted at a facility that you are familiar with. You can go there. So Optimum is an example of what we call a private cloud. For those of you who've taken tours and went by our data room, that data room's humming with a lot of companies' servers and backups and data. And so if any of our clients said, I want my data, or I want my server, they'd be able to walk up and either take their server from our server room, or take a terabyte or multi-terabyte drive and download their server onto that drive and walk away, and they know exactly where it is. That is what I'm defining as a private cloud. There's a little bit of difference between a hosted server and a colo server. I don't have to, if we have some questions about that later, I can talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, that's defined as, or I'm defining it as a private cloud. Last but not least, we have a public cloud. Public clouds, Amazon, Rackspace, Microsoft, these are those server farms out there. That's what, when people say the cloud, this is more or less what they're talking about in most cases. not thinking that the cloud can exist on all of these levels. So that is, you are buying space on somebody else's cloud someplace. They will charge you by RAM space. They will charge you by processing speed. They will essentially rent you a piece of their cloud, and you can have a server that sits out there that does many things. Some of it is application specific, meaning it's a specific Microsoft application or a specific accounting, like for example, QuickBooks and Intuit. They have their cloud, so you're having your data on a public Intuit cloud. That's a specific application cloud. But essentially, it is a cloud out there, and in no manner could you ever actually physically go there and get your stuff, get your data or your server. So, real big overview to start. Any questions to start off with? Yes, sir.
So is cloud just another word for network?
It's a good question, and in a way, the difference is the network is what connects it together.
Sure.
Right?
But
where the cloud is where the data sits.
Okay, which
Okay.
is servers.
Which is a server that is on a network.
Yeah.
Right. And if you see the drawings people make, they'll always put like a cloud up, and sometimes they're talking about a public cloud, but oftentimes, Joe brought up an example of CH2 and Hill. They have, they're kind of a mix between these two, because they have a huge data center that the world, that their company accesses it, but it's their cloud. Nobody else can access it but them.
Sure.
But it's networked.
Right. So it's a secure network.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. But can you use the word networking in cloud?
Well, it seems like cloud came about because there's just more sharing of this data and information, or even functionality and so forth, right?
That's exactly right. So, anybody else? Okay. So, what I want to jump into here, again, I want to make this more of a high-level business conversation. So, I'm going to go into the pros and cons of each of these options, kick those around, and then I'm happy to either start a discussion depending on how much time we have, in terms of what we can learn here. So, some of the pros of having your own personal cloud, if you will. There's only one-time hardware software cost, meaning you buy that box and outside of some basic maintenance, it's yours, and you're not having to pay monthly for it. Easier, faster access to server-based applications. So in other words, if I have my server here in this room, and I am attached, I'm connected to it through what I call my LAN through wires, I can always access that software. Even if the internet goes down around me, even if something catastrophic happens outside, I can access that. And as you'll see later, some cons, some applications are so complicated or so big that they really need to be in-house. They have to be close to you, and that is a huge advantage to having your servers networked, internally. And as I said, it's not reliable on external bandwidth for internal issues. And I'm going to say high level of security. Why do I say that? Security, and that's a whole other presentation in terms of network security, but picture, and if you do it right, I've walked into offices and there are servers in their break room, next to the toaster, right? But other than that, right, don't unplug it, right? But other than that, if you have it in a secure room that's locked, okay, and you have the right amount of firewall and antivirus protecting it, that's a pretty secure situation. Why? It's not that you have all of the protections that a facility like this would put on or a public cloud would put on, but it's not a big target. It's just sitting there, and somebody would have to actively try to find you and attack you. And most of the bad guys out there are looking for bigger targets. So it works on security on two different levels. Is it 100% secure? No, nothing is. But again, that's another presentation. So some of the cons of personal of these premise-based clouds, there can be some high upfront costs. You do have to pay it upfront in most cases, unless there's a leasing option. Fewer redundancies built in the systems, meaning you don't have the redundant bandwidth. You don't have you should have some at least power backup, but you don't have the same level of power backup that a facility like this or Lattice's would have. reliant on bandwidth for external users, meaning, you know, if it's, if the internet does go down, we can all get to the server here in this room, but the guy working at home can't, because that's gonna be, they're gonna be cut off, whereas, you know, if it's hosted otherwise. More difficult to scale, that's a big one, right? If you have a business that has about 10 employees, but then next year it's gonna be 50 employees, you better buy a box big enough for 50 employees, because you're not gonna wanna rip and replace that. Responsible for upgrading hardware over time, that is something that you would have to do. At Optimum, we say for your average server, 3 to 5 years. You want to keep that server. And that's usually when those manufacturer warranties go out. You have to start buying extended warranties, and you start seeing some more area, some more vulnerability in that time frame. So some private cloud pros and cons, and I try not to get repetitive here because they overlap to some degree, but sure enough, less upfront cost, hardware cost. You are, as long as it's not a colo type of situation, you are going to be renting space and renting that type of thing on an ongoing basis, so you don't have to pay that all up front. Again, more redundancies that we would build into a building like this, or even more so with a data center. Don't have to worry about the ongoing hardware. Scalability. So getting back to that is, if you got 10 employees, at this point, when you're gonna grow to 50, you buy 10 licenses and 10 spots for your folks, and you add them as you go. And in a year, you're at 50, and it doesn't matter, because we can accommodate 10, 50, or 200. It all depends on where you're at that time. And I'm gonna say it's a even higher level of security. One, because we do have more security built into that you would at a private cloud, but we're also not a big target. Even as big as we get, we'll still be a small fish from the standpoint of people are going to be targeting, you know, larger targets. So is it again, not perfect, but it is a higher level of security. So some of the cons of the private cloud is you do have a monthly investment involved with that. The access is reliant on bandwidth. So once again, if you are not being able to access, if you're at home, you won't be able to, you know, access it at the server or here, either way. Whereas obviously, if there's a bandwidth problem, you could always go to your office if it's in your office and access it. And as I mentioned before, some folks, some specific industry proprietary software packages, they say it's got to be premise. In that case, that's what we ask our folks, right, when they're thinking about it. Initially, we ask them that question: what type of applications you're running and how local do they need to be? Okay, so getting on the larger public cloud, less upfront hardware carries. It's even going to be lower because they can sell things in terms of scale. And have more redundancies built in the system. Obviously, they have quite an investment into their infrastructure. Not responsible for ongoing hardware care, same as before. Scalability, the same. You can buy as much as you need. There's also a lot of flexibilities in licensing, and also keep in mind that there are application-specific clouds like QuickBooks and Intuit, like Microsoft and Office 365, like Salesforce.com. That's another example where you can just be on their cloud and have your specific application hosted by another provider. Some cons on that, if you're all on the cloud, this one's a big one: reliability and control issues. If you know engineers, if you know computer folks and engineers, and we're kind of you know, that obsessive type of wanting to have control, right? If your Intuit cloud goes down, if your Microsoft cloud goes down, your Office 365, and you call us and say, I can't email, Office 365, you know, it's not working, and we know that Microsoft is having an issue, and they do have issues, and they're not bulletproof, we have to say, I'm sorry, you know, but if it's on our cloud, or a private cloud, or on your cloud, on a personal cloud, we go straight in there, and we fix it. And so that's a huge difference in terms of how much control that we can have and how quickly we can get you up and running. All we can do is open up a ticket with that cloud provider, and like about 1 million other people are doing at that precise time. Security issues, again, they have a huge amount of securities, but they also have a certain amount of risk. Keep in mind that it's not just your data sitting there, but your data sitting there is amongst everybody else's data too. So and if somebody's targeting somebody else's data, your data might be in the way, and it could be stolen or corrupted as well. But again, I don't want to downplay the fact that they do have a lot of security, a lot of security in place for that. And again, it's something you have to pay for monthly, and it's something you have to keep on paying over time for the life of your business, whatever that might be. And local application print issues, we do find though, and oftentimes we're creating somewhat of a hybrid. If folks are better suited for the cloud, sometimes we're putting a small, what they call a domain control server, so that people can access it and print. And it's actually a very expensive small server that we have locally, just so that you can do certain things and not have to worry about some basic things. There's some issues with the cloud or the public cloud. So questions about that? Those are kind of those three areas, sort of high level.
So can you go a little bit further into the print issues thing? So on the local application piece, you know,
Mm-hmm.
are you virtualizing the servers? Are you running applications in the cloud?
So on the personal side, you mean like that cloud that
Well, even on the public side, like right now, there's a big press from Google and Microsoft to push application services to the cloud.
Right.
And so
Google
I'm just
Apps
curious what the
Cloud.
specifics are related to the print issues and that type of thing, because I would think that would be something they'd have to have fairly bulletproof if I'm going to do Excel on the virtual server
and you want to
someplace.
print it up.
Right.
It's a really good question, and it's not really bulletproof. It's not something that people have easy answers for in a lot of the cases. We deal more with printing issues with folks that are completely in the cloud than not. And it is the type of thing where we can fix it. It doesn't necessarily stay fixed. That's why we like to have a local box, if you will, a local server that has a brain over all that stuff. And that's our solution to make that bulletproof. And again, it's not a big investment to have a small server that does that type of thing.
So
Those
the
print
work-
issues are usually around like a proprietary software or product,
That's
right? That runs the business.
Yeah, it's not like printing up an Excel file or
Right.
a Word document.
More the,
Because
it's one of the issues that we've struggled with. I mean, you talk about volume of printing. I mean, we're printing a huge volume of checks and reports and, all that kind of stuff. And that's been one of the challenges because we're printing over bandwidth, and so trying to figure that out has been a puzzle sometimes.
Is it specific to the application or is it just in general?
It's both.
Is
It's
it?
both specific to the application and also to the way the infrastructure is set up.
Interesting. Okay, so that's just not quite there yet, it sounds like.
and it's different for everybody. There are cloud, or you wouldn't call it cloud network, things like remote desktop on the Microsoft side, Citrix, which is a more general one. Those guys do have it down. I mean, that's their that's what their software does, is negotiate that, and so that if you have Citrix, you usually don't have those issues, and yet that's pricey too. So it's a matter of kind of figuring that out, and that's kind of why we like to build that hybrid, if you will, environment, so that we can nail out all those issues at a time. It's a great question. Anything else on the overall pros and cons? So I threw out some questions that you may want to ask yourself and or your clients, or you may hear your clients come up with, which way should we go? So, how mobile is my workforce? The more mobile, the more you might be suited with either a private or a public cloud. Our growth trajectory, is it okay, we've got 20 people and we're going to be 20 people for the next 4 or 5 years, and then maybe we'll grow a little bit? Or is it, or as the scenario before, 10 now, 50 next year, 200, 5 years from now? That's going to be a more scalable model. And don't forget, you can start on the cloud and migrate to a premise-based, or the other way around. You can start premise and then migrate to the cloud. How important security? That is something that you should be asking yourselves no matter what, with any IT decision, to be honest with you. But at the same time, we have clients that say, no, I don't want my secret sauce, I don't want my family jewels, I don't want our data shared with a bunch of other people's data. I want it in a secure server and in a secure room. So that's also something to consider. what apps are you running and how much access do employees need to that app. Dentist office come up for me. Their scheduling and practice software is so large, so clunky, that it really doesn't go well on the cloud. Those folks need access to it, and it needs to be moving constantly very quickly, or they lose. So most folks with that type of software need it right there in their office. And other folks, whereas let's say you're just hitting Salesforce or a CRM or an accounting program, it's a little more flexible with that ability to be in the cloud. A long-term versus short-term investment strategy. There's some people in here that work with that, right? I don't know. Some questions you might ask your clients.
So if you're interested,
Yeah.
there are real estate investment trusts that specialize in data centers. So if you're worried about the cost of putting stuff on the cloud, you can supplement that by investing in the cloud. If you're interested, let me know.
Nice swing.
So for our money folks, I thought
They do quite well too.
There you
So.
go. For the money folks, I put together this, and this is a real high level. This doesn't really get into nitty gritties of the labor and the specific needs of the client and all the different apps that might go here or there. But this is just really, you're going to buy a server, you're going to put it in your office and protect it versus you're going to go to like a basic Office 365. And Office 365 gives you your Exchange and your Outlook and gives you all of your Office apps and all that, all of those features or all those applications. So essentially, if you go with Office 365, you can see that for 35 employees, on the enterprise plan, $24 a month, and so that's what your monthly investment will be. Versus a premise, this is going to be your upfront cost because you buy the server, you buy the licenses. We recommend buying the licenses from a perspective of the open license so that you don't have to buy the upgrades as they come out over a period of 3 to 5 years. They get upgraded for you. But as you can see, the break even, and it's pretty typical, is about 31 months. So we're a little bit over a couple of years. So is that the presentation? Any questions? Yes?
How much technology changes in between that 31 months? So if you're renting from somebody, and the technology is constantly changing, wouldn't it be beneficial to stay on the rental plan? And I call it rental plan.
Yeah, sure.
To stay on the rental plan and keep up with, let somebody else buy the technology instead of you having to upgrade it every 31 months?
Absolutely. Well, and yes and no to that, to be sure. It is definitely a plus, a pro, if you will, on the two rental plans or the public or private cloud where you're renting that software, is that you don't have to invest in the upkeep or the advancement of the technology there. They do that for you. And so that's definitely a positive there. On the flip side, though, if you buy a server, and then 31 months, that's we say that 3 to 5 years is that life of that server. It's not going to, technology applications certainly will go faster, but in terms of hardware getting better over a period of time, it'll take 3 to 5 years for the next level of processing speeds and all that stuff. So you're not going to be super behind if you're ready at that point to now reinvest in the latest and greatest and the next thing. And sometimes it's like cars. So some people will buy a car, and 3 years later they want the next car, and then leasing might make more sense at that point, right? Because they want to swap out that car every 3-4 years. Whereas some people, and we've met those folks. How old's your server? 10 years old. Oh my gosh! But it still runs. It works, right? But can we get the software? But you can do that. You can ride those servers and really make that investment count, if you will. And you can still be upgrading on some levels, increasing the memory and whatnot. But oftentimes, though, when people come with 4-, 5-, 6-year-old servers and they're coming to us, we're telling them, and they've got some plans. We're saying, now it's either going to be time to move to the cloud if they don't have that upfront investment tolerance, or time to get a new server. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Super.
Question, Jonathan.
Yeah.
There's a discussion, if you're in a large cloud, right, Google or
Right.
Facebook, whatever it is, who really owns the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's some clarification on that.
It's a really good question, and you guys are, you know, I wish I had this meeting before, I could have added pros and cons on there, you know, added it with your input. But you do own the data, in almost every sense. There are some, and you have to be careful, there are some, I'm trying to think if there was a company that I worked with years ago that they were a restaurant chain, and they had all of their data on this, you know, specific application for their company, and they said, okay, we're ready to go our own way, and they said, no, sorry, this is all ours. And we're like, wait a minute, these are our records, and I'm not kidding, this cloud company said, no, it is ours, it's our, and the company I was with at the time did not feel ethically out of line for hacking and rescuing this company, and they actually did. They actually went in
Oh
and
my
rescued
God.
this company's data because it was ridiculous what they were doing. I think that is an exception, but it is a possibility out there. And from a legal standpoint, if you really, and that's what I meant about putting your you know, the secret sauce or family jewels out there. That's another consideration. It's not just somebody might steal it. The company itself might say, okay, this is in our area, so we have certain rights to it. So that's a legal thing that you definitely want to work out, you know, before you're signing these contracts, these cloud contracts. Yes.
So, question about Office 365.
Yes.
For someone who's a heavy user of Word and Excel and pretty decent sized Word and Excel files,
Mhm.
how well does that Office 365 work as compared to just having the local versions on your individual computers?
Great question, and that is a huge advantage of Office 365. By the way, it comes with Office, so you don't have to buy an additional license for Office on your computer. So if you back up there, that I don't know if you break it out, John, where it's Office, yeah, Office Professional Plus, essentially comes with that, and not only can you work on it in and you get it, you can work those huge files on your computer when you save them. It also comes with SharePoint. So a small organization can have that sort of private, it's not really a private cloud because it's in Microsoft, but it's that access so that you guys are document sharing, more than one person's working on a spreadsheet simultaneously, version control, so that if somebody screws it up, you can go back one. SharePoint's a very powerful tool. You can get that in the private cloud as well, but you can also get it in that Office 365 environment. Anything you want to add to that, John?
Nope, that sounds about right.
Great. And I think, I don't know if I've introduced to everybody, to John Soberheim in the back of the room. He's came on with Optimum last fall as inside sales. He's a Microsoft licensing expert, and if I didn't just say gold to all of you, that's gold, because it's such a complicated field, and he's great at it. He does a lot of our coding, a lot of our you know, proposals, as well as he helps out a lot with marketing. So that's John, and he's a resource for all of us in this room as well.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, can I ask one other quick question?
Last question.
Since we talked about the Office Professional thing.
Yeah.
In the past, we've done a lot of, well, I have, not with Tilden, but in previous lives, a lot of work with Office because it's easy to deliver to people. So we've
Right.
used it a lot as essentially a report delivery tool.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those tools have been fairly complex. I mean, hitting SQL Server, Oracle database kind of stuff.
Sure.
In the Office 365 space, have you any thoughts on how well that operates? I mean, if you were to build something where you're actually hitting, let's say, a SQL Server database and creating rather complex data delivery stuff through Office 365, I can't get my head around exactly how they architect that
Sure.
solution.
And it's a great question. It's a question that we would want to kick around with our team and really know what the different applications are, how SQL is going to be interacting with it. Office 365, think about it, it's mostly Exchange. it's gonna be your email server, it's gonna
Right.
give you, document
Base business
sharing,
stuff.
which is the SharePoint side of it. There's this thing called Link that helps you with presence and get to know each other a little bit better. And that's what Office 365 does, and that's all that you would get here. SQL Server, that'd be another,
Right.
you could get an instance of that on the cloud as well. And then it gets back to that, do you want that all those eggs where you can count them, or do you want them kind of scrambled? It's up to you, and it also is up to your goals, and it'd be a great meeting for us to sit down with some of our engineers, find the end goal and the best way to get that with the combination.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. Perfect example of the resources we have in our group. Use the expertise. I know that Jonathan's available to meet or talk about what your needs are, and just to provide advice, right? And that's one of the biggest things that we do in our group is be that trusted advisor and get the right advice for the right issue. A couple things. I thought I was going to be the very first one to have my credit card authorization in. You all got this in your email yesterday. We're really trying to get them all in by July 1st so that our third quarter dues can be processed by credit card. Again, the motivation for that is streamlining Carrie's job so that she can spend more time on our marketing campaign that's coming up, our online social media. And so we're trying to leverage automation, right? So if you can get your credit card authorization in, I thought it was going to be first, but then Jonathan had somebody in his organization do it for him. When you have people, I can't compete, right? So make sure that you get that over to Carrie, and that we just want to automate that whole process for our organization.
Is there any concerns on that? I just want to make sure everybody's cool with that.
If you're not cool with it, come talk to me. I'll twist your arm. Coming up, July 1st, we're going to be out at the Highlands Ranch Golf Course. And so I know Chris Young is already working on his presentation. It's going to be another fantastic educational component, so you want to make sure you don't miss it. If you are willing to stick around and do 9 holes of golf, I know we have at least 2 groups that are going, and I know we can get a third, so definitely hang out if you can. That's coming up July 1st. Just don't go to the University of Denver. You'll be in the wrong spot.
That's where Chris Young is again.
He's there this morning. And then July 15th, we will be back at the Ritchie Center, and Roger's going to be giving us another fantastic educational presentation. So some great things coming up. Hopefully, you guys will. I know we're missing a few because of summer schedules, but hopefully we won't miss too many of you guys through the summer, and we're looking forward to some really good things. Thank you to our guests for joining us. And I think we're wrapping up on time. Carrie, did you have
I just wanted, I have one more tea time. Right now we have 2 full foursomes.
Okay.
Because Chris has been added to the 9:30, so we have I got one more tea time, so we have room for 4.
Room for 4 more. So do we have anybody else that wants to go on the 1st?
Okay.
I see.
Well, you can always.
I'm not that good.
Hey,
9 holes.
golf with me, you'll have no problem.
If I could just chip and putt, I'll be good.
But yes, be there for the 1st. It's going to be a great meeting, and if you can bring a guest, there's going to be great. The professional tips are really good. So we did the same thing last year. It was a fantastic meeting. So even if you're not a golfer, still come because it's a great time. So we'll see you guys in a couple weeks, and thank you for joining us.
Wireless systems management. So anything wireless.
Appreciate it.